Part 2, Writing in and Out of College. Academic Writing, Critical Reading and Writing, Argument, Essay Exams, Oral Presentations, Public Writing. Writing in and out of college. Academic Writing, Purpose and audience, genre, structure and content, using sources with integrity, academic language, communication in an academic setting, critical reading and writing, using techniques of critical reading, summarizing, developing a critical response, viewing visuals critically, writing critically. Sample, critical analysis. Argument, elements of an argument, reasonableness, organization, visual arguments, sample arguments, essay exams, preparing, planning, starting, developing, rereading. Oral presentations, organization, delivery, public writing, social media, business letters, job applications, memos, reports, and proposals, community work. 9. Academic writing. Analyze the purpose and audience in each writing situation below. Use an appropriate academic genre. Choose appropriate structure and content. Use sources with integrity. Use academic language. Communicate effectively with instructors and classmates. When you take college courses, you enter a community of teachers and students whose basic goal is to share and build knowledge about a subject, whether it is English, history, engineering, or something else. You participate in this community by studying each subject, by asking questions, and by communicating your answers in writing. This chapter gives you ways to approach academic writing situations and make a contribution to knowledge building. 9a. Determining purpose and audience. Like any writing, academic writing occurs in a particular situation created by your assignment and by your subject, purpose, and audience. The assignment and subject will be different for each project, but some generalizations can be made about the other elements. If you haven't already done so, read 1, pp. 3-9, on writing situations and their elements. 1. Purpose. For most academic writing, your general purpose will be mainly explanatory or mainly argumentative. That is, you will aim to clarify your subject by analyzing, describing, or reporting on it so that readers understand it as you do, or you will aim to gain readers' agreements with a debatable idea about the subject. Your specific purpose, including your subject and how you hope readers will respond, depends on the genre, the kind of writing that you are doing. For instance, in a literature review for a biology class, you will want readers to understand the research area you're covering, the recent contributions made by researchers, the issues needing further research, and the sources you consulted. Not coincidentally, these topics correspond to the major sections of a literature review. In following the standard format, you both help to define your purpose and begin to meet the disciplines, and thus your instructor's expectations. Your specific purpose will be more complex as well. You take a course to learn about a subject and the ways experts think about it. Your writing, in return, contributes to the discipline through the knowledge you uncover and the lens of your perspective. At the same time, as a student, you want to demonstrate your competence with research, evidence, format, and other requirements of this discipline. Audience. Many academic writing assignments will specify or assume an educated audience or an academic audience. Such readers look for writing that is clear, balanced, well organized, and well reasoned. Other assignments will specify or assume an audience of experts on your subject. Readers who look in addition for writing that meets the subject's requirements for claims and evidence, organization, language format, and other qualities. Much of your academic writing will have only one reader besides you, the instructor of the course. Instructors fill two main roles as readers. 1. They represent the audience you are addressing. They may actually be members of the audience when you address academic readers or subject experts, or they may imagine themselves as members of your audience. Reading, for instance, as if they sat on the city council. In either case, they are interested in how effectively you write for the audience. 2. They serve as coaches, guiding you towards achieving the goals of the course and, more broadly, toward the academic aims of building and communicating knowledge. Like everyone else, instructors have preferences and peeves, but you waste time and energy trying to anticipate them. Do attend to written and spoken directions for assignments, of course, but otherwise view your instructors as representatives of the community you are writing for. Their responses will be guided by the community's aims and expectations, by a desire to teach you about them. 9b. Using an academic genre. Many academic writing assignments will suggest the genre in which you are to write, the kind of writing and or the format. Sometimes the genre is prescribed, such as the literature review mentioned earlier, with its standard content and format. Other assignments imply the genre, such as those that ask you to analyze, explain, compare, and argue. In these cases, your responses would most likely be conventional academic essays, introduction, thesis statement, supporting paragraphs, and conclusion that analyze and compare in order to explain or argue. Whether genre is specified or implied in your assignment, you are being asked to demonstrate your ability to write competently in that genre. The descriptions below and on the following pages discuss genres commonly assigned in college courses and point out examples that appear elsewhere in this book. In addition, Chapter 12 explains the special requirements of essay exams, and Chapter 14 contains examples of genres used in public writing: application letter and resume, memo, report, proposal, social media post, and newsletter. Responses to texts or visuals. Responses to texts or visuals involve close reading, summary, and analysis. For more on analyzing and responding to texts and visuals, see Chapter 10. Personal response to a reading. Use your own experiences, observations, and opinions to explain how and why you agree or disagree, or both, with the author's argument. A personal response essay usually includes a thesis statement that conveys the essence of your response, a brief summary of the author's main points, and your own main points, of agreement or disagreement. Critical analysis, critique of a text or visual. Closely examine a text or visual. Identifying and describing important elements of the work and analyzing how the elements contribute to the whole. Often a critical analysis or critique also includes the evaluation of the quality and significance of the work. The genre contains an arguable thesis stating your interpretation, a brief summary or description of the work, and examples from the text or visual as a support for your thesis and main points. Literary analysis. Argue for an interpretation of a work based on careful reading, giving particular attention to the work's language, structure, meaning, and themes. In a literary analysis, you state your interpretation in a thesis, and then support your thesis with examples from the work. Some literary analyses draw on others' views and information, such as a scholar's interpretation, or the works or facts of a scholar's life. See 8 for a literary analysis that draws on secondary sources. Arguments. Argument seeks to persuade readers, moving them to action, or convincing them to think as you do. Written arguments contain an arguable thesis statement, a claim reasonable people can disagree over, usually with support for its main points and acknowledging the opposing points of view. Arguments often involve research, but not always. For a detailed discussion of writing arguments, see Chapter 11. Proposal argument. Define a problem. Give a solution. Explain how the solution can be implemented and respond to possible objections to the solution. Position argument. Seek to convince readers to agree with your position on a debatable issue, such as lowering the drinking age or requiring military service. A position argument includes or introduces the issue, conveys your position in a thesis statement, makes claims and gives evidence to support your position, and responds to views opposed to your own. Depending on the assignment, evidence may be personal or gathered from research or both. A type of position argument is literary analysis, described on the previous page, which makes a case for your interpretation of a work of literature. Evaluation argument. Judge whether something is good or effective. A common type of evaluation argument is a critical analysis of a text or visual, described on the previous page. Reviews of books, movies, exhibits, and so on are also evaluation arguments. 3. Informative writing. Informative writing seeks to teach readers about a subject. When you write to inform, you explore a subject in depth and provide information that readers may not know. Informative writing often, but not always, involves research. In the social, natural, and applied sciences, informative writing can include summaries and case studies in addition to research-based writing. Informative essay. Explain a subject such as a situation or a process. Typically, an informative essay begins with an introduction and a thesis statement that previews your major points. Then, the body paragraphs support the thesis with evidence. Depending on the assignment, an informative essay may focus on a non-personal subject, such as money in college or football. It may arise from personal experience and thus overlap in the personal essay. Informative research paper or report. Draw on research to explain a subject, answer a question, or describe the results of a survey or experiment. This genre includes research papers, research reports, or lab reports, all described on the facing page. 4. Personal writing. A personal essay often narrates the writer's experience or describes a person or place, usually in vivid detail. What makes a personal essay interesting is the insight that the writer provides, showing why the subject is significant to the writer and the readers. A literacy narrative is a particular kind of personal story, your experience with learning to read and or write. 5. Research papers and reports. Most research projects involve reporting information or results, interpreting a range of views on a topic, or analyzing a problem and arguing for a solution. Research paper. Develop an informative or argumentative thesis statement. Draw on and cite multiple sources to support the thesis, and emphasize synthesis of your source's views and data from your own perspective. Research report. Explain your own original research or your attempt to replicate someone else's research. A research report generally includes an abstract or summary, an introduction describing your research and reviewing prior research on the subject, a description of methods, the results, discussion of the results, and a list of any sources you may have cited. 9C. Choosing structure and content. Academic writing assignments widely vary, of course, but they tend to share the following key goals. Each goal is discussed in more detail on the pages cited. Develop a main point in your writing. Most academic papers center on a main point, or thesis, and support that thesis with evidence. Depending on the genre you are writing in, the main point may be an opinion, a summary of findings, or a conclusion based on primary research you have conducted, such as an experiment or a survey. Support the main point with evidence, drawn usually from your reading, personal experience, or primary research. The kind of evidence you will use will depend on the kind of discipline you're writing in and the type of paper you're doing. For more evidence, see P102 argument or P418 literature. Synthesize your own and others' ideas. College writing often involves researching and interacting with the works of other writers, being open to their ideas, responding to them, questioning them, comparing them, and even using them to answer questions. Such interactions requires you to read critically and to synthesize or integrate others' ideas into your own. For more on synthesis in academic writing, CPP 96. Use academic language. Unless your instructor specifies otherwise, choose formal standard English. Acknowledge sources fully, including online sources. Academic writers build on the works of others by citing borrowed ideas and information. Always record the publication information for your sources. Put other writers' words in quotation marks and cite the source of every quotation. Paraphrase and summary. Not acknowledging sources is plagiarism. See the following section. Organize and clearly within the framework of the type of writing you're doing. Develop your ideas as simply and directly as your purpose and content allow. Relate sentences, paragraphs, and sections clearly so that readers always know where they are in the paper's development. These features of academic writing are not universal. In some cultures, academic writing may be indirect, may assume that readers will discover the thesis, or may be based on only well-known sources whose ideas are closely adhered to. In U.S. colleges and universities, students are expected to look for relevant and reliable sources, well-known or not, and to use sources mainly to support their own ideas. 9D. Using sources with integrity. Academic integrity is the foundation of academic knowledge and building. Trusting in one another's honesty allows students and scholars to examine and extend the work of other scholars, and it allows teachers to guide and assess the progress of their students. You can build your integrity as a writer by working to develop your own ideas and handling sources responsibly. The following tips can help. See also Chapter 7 for extensive discussions of researching and citing sources. One, avoiding plagiarism. Many writing assignments will require you to consult sources such as journal articles, websites, and books. These works belong to their creators. You are free to borrow from them if you wish to do, but with integrity. That means representing the sources accurately, not misinterpreting or distorting what they say. It also means crediting the sources, not plagiarizing or presenting sources, ideas and information as if they were your own. On most campuses, plagiarism is a punishable offense. Plagiarism can be deliberate or careless. Deliberate plagiarism is outright cheating. Copying another writer's sentence or ideas and passing it off as your own. Buying a paper from the web or getting someone else to write a paper for you. Careless plagiarism is more common among students, often arises from inattentive or inexperienced handling of sources. For instance, you might cut and paste source information into your own ideas without clarifying who said what, or you might present a summary of a source without recognizing that parts of it are actually quoted. In these cases, the plagiarism is unintentional, but it is still plagiarism. 2. Developing perspective on a subject. Consider your own knowledge and perspective on a subject before you start to research. This forethought will make it easier for you to recognize other authors' perspectives and to treat them fairly in your writing, whether or not you agree with them. Before you consult sources, gauge what you already know and think about your subject. Give yourself time to know your own mind before looking to others for information. Then, you'll be able to reflect on how the sources reinforce, contradict, or expand what you already know. Evaluate sources carefully. Authors generally write from particular perspectives, and some are more overt about their biases than others. You wouldn't reject a source because it is biased. Indeed, you'll want to consider multiple perspectives, but you do not need to recognize and weigh the writer's position for a discussion of evaluating sources. Treat sources fairly. Represent an author's ideas and perspectives as they were originally presented, without misunderstanding or distortion. Be careful in paraphrasing and summarizing, not to misrepresent the author's meaning. Be careful in editing quotations, not to omit essential words. Managing sources. You can avoid plagiarism by keeping track of the sources you consult. the ideas that influence your thinking, and the words that your sentences borrow by carefully citing the sources in the writing. If these habits aren't familiar to you, keep the following list handy. Keep track of source information as you read. Get in the habit of always recording publication information, the author, title, date, and so on, of any source you read, as well as any ideas you glean from it. Be careful with quotations. If you cut and paste a portion of an article, website, or other source into your document, put quotation marks around it so that you don't mix your words and the source's words accidentally. Check any quotation that you use in your own writing against the original source. For a more detailed discussion of how to quote sources, CPP 7. Use your own words in the paraphrases and summaries. A paraphrase or summary presents the ideas of a source, but not in the exact words of the original, and not in quotation marks. You will be less likely to use the source author's words, and thus plagiarize. If you look away from the source, will you write down what you remember from it? Note: you still must cite the source of a summary or paraphrase, just as you do with a quotation. For a more detailed discussion on how to summarize and paraphrase sources, CPP 391. Cite your sources. As you draft, be conscious of when you're using source information, and be conscientious about clearly marking where the borrowed material comes from. In your final draft, you'll use a particular style of citation within your text to refer to a detailed list of sources at the end. This book presents 4 such styles: MLA style for English and humanities, APA style for the social scientists, Chicago style for her history, philosophy and other humanities, and the CSE style for natural and applied sciences. 9E. Using academic language. American academic writing relies on a dialect called Standard American English. The dialect is also used in business, the professions, the government, the media, and other sites of social and economic power where people of diverse backgrounds must communicate with one another. It is standard, not because it is better than other forms of English, but because it is accepted as the common language, much as the dollar bill is accepted as the common currency. In writing, Standard American English varies a great deal, from the formality of an academic research report to the more relaxed language of this handbook, to informal emails between co-workers in a company, even in academic writing. Much room for the writer's own tone and voice as these passages on the same topic show. More formal. Responsibility for the widespread problem of obesity among Americans depends on the person or a group, depending on the problem and proposing a solution. Some people believe the cause lies with individuals who make poor eating choices for themselves and parents who feed unhealthy foods to their children. Others take strong issues with the food industry, citing food manufacturers and fast food chains that create and advertise food that is high in sugar, fat, and sodium. Still, others place responsibility on American society as a whole for performing a sedentary lifestyle centered on screen-based activities such as watching television and using computers for video games and social interaction. Drawn-out phrasing, such as widespread, problem of obesity among Americans. More complicated sentence structures such as take strong issue with the food industry, citing food manufacturers and fast food chains that create and advertise. More formal vocabulary, responsibility, children, and television. Less formal. Who is or what is to blame for the obesity epidemic depends on who is talking and what they want to do about the problem. Some people blame eaters for making bad choices and parents for feeding their kids unhealthy foods. Others demonize food manufacturers and fast food chains for creating and advertising sugary, fatty, and sodium-loaded food. Still, others point to Americans generally spending too much time in front of screens, watching TV, playing video games, or going on Facebook. More informal phrasing such as an obesity epidemic. Less complicated sentence structures such as demonize food manufacturers and fast food chains for creating and advertising. More informal vocabulary. Blame, kids, TV. As different as they are, both examples illustrate several common features of academic language. It follows the conventions of standard American English for grammar and usage. These conventions are described in guides to the dialect, such as this handbook. It uses a standard vocabulary, not one that only some groups understand, such as slang, an ethnic dialect, or other language. It does not use the informalities of everyday speech, texting, and instant messaging. Including incompleteness, sentences, slang, no capital letters, and shortened spellings. It generally uses the third person, he, she, it, they. The first person I is sometimes appropriate to express personal opinions, but academic writers tend to avoid it and make conclusions speak for themselves. The first person, we could connect with readers and invite them to think along. But again, many academic writers avoid it. The second person, you, is appropriate only in addressing readers directly, as in this handbook, and even then, it may seem condescending or too chummy. Definitely avoid it using or implying you in conversational expressions such as, you know what I mean, and don't take this the wrong way. It is authoritative and neutral. In the examples on the previous page, the writers express themselves confidently, not timidly, as in explaining the causes of obesity, requires the reader's patience because the writers also refrain from hostility, the food industry's callous attitude towards health, and enthusiasm, the food industry's clever and appealing advertisements. At first, the diverse demands of academic writing may leave you groping for an appropriate voice. In an effort to sound fresh and confident, you may write too casually, as if speaking to friends or family. Too casual. Getting the truth about the obesity epidemic in the U.S. requires some heavy lifting. It turns out that everyone else is to blame for the problem. Big eaters, reckless corporations, and all those Americans who think it's okay to be a couch potato. In an effort to sound academic, you may produce wordy and awkward sentences. Wordy and awkward. The responsibility for the problem of widespread obesity among Americans depend on the manner of defining the problem and the proposals for its solution. In some discussions, the cause of obesity is thought to be individuals who are unable or unwilling to make healthy choices in their own diets, and parents who similarly make unhealthy choices for their children. The passive voice of this example cause is thought to be instead of the people blame, adds to its wordiness and indirection. A cure for writing too informally or stiffly is to read academic writing so that the language and style become familiar, and to edit your writing. If your first language or dialect is not standard American English, learning to write standard English in no way requires you to abandon your first language. Like most multilingual people, you are probably already adept at switching between languages as the situation demands. Speaking one way with your relatives, say, and another with the employer. As you practice your academic writing, you'll develop the same flexibility with it. Use academic language. Revise the following paragraph to make the language more academic while keeping the factual information the same. If you buy into the stereotype of girls chatting away on their cell phones, you should think again. One of the major wireless companies surveyed 1,021 cell phone owners for a period of 5 years and reported that guys talk on cell phones more than girls do. In fact, guys were way ahead of girls, using an average of 571 minutes a month compared to 424 for girls. That's 35% more time on the phone. The survey also asked about conversations on landlines, and while girls still beat the field, the guys were catching up. 9F. Communicating in an academic setting. As a member of an academic community, you will not only write papers and projects, but also write directly to instructors, classmates, and other people at your school via email. Course management systems such as Blackboard and Canvas, and other electronic media. Your written communication with instructors and classmates will rarely be as formal as assigned writing, but it will also rarely be as informal as a text message to a friend, a tweet, or a comment on Facebook. Even in a short email, your message will receive a better hearing if you present yourself well and show respect for your readers. The following message illustrates an appropriate mix of formality and informality when addressing an instructor. 2. C.M. White at cms.edu. Uses subject line to describe the content of the message. Subject: Research Paper Planning Conference. Address the instructor with formality with title and last name. Dear Professor White. Provides context for request. Uses complete sentences and words. I am in your 810 English 111 class, and I'm writing to schedule a planning conference to discuss possible motives for the research paper. I recently read an article about smoking in movie theaters, and I'm interested about pursuing the topic for my paper. However, I know I'll have to narrow the topic, and I'm not sure how to do that. Would you be available to meet sometime between 11 and 1 next Tuesday or Thursday? Sincerely, Rachel Rogers. Signs with full name and phone number. Here are guidelines for such communications. Use the medium your instructor prefers. Don't text, tweet, or use a social networking site unless you're invited to do so. Use names in the body of your message. Address your readers by name if possible, unless your teachers instruct otherwise. Always address them formally. As appropriate, followed by last name. Sign off with your own name and information on how to contact you. Pay attention to tone. Don't use all capital letters which shout, and use irony and sarcasm only cautiously. In the absence of facial expressions, either one can lead to misunderstanding. Pay attention to correctness, especially when you write to instructors. Avoid the shortcuts of texting and tweeting, such as incomplete sentences and abbreviations. U for you, R for R, and so on. Proofread for errors in grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Send messages only to the people who need them. As a general rule, avoid sending messages to many recipients at once. All the students in a course say, unless what you have to say applies to all of them. Before you hit reply all in response to a message, ensure that all want to see the response. Guard your own and others' privacy. Online tools allow us to broadcast hurtful information about others, and allow others to do the same to us. Before you post a message about yourself or someone else, consider if it's worthwhile and who will see it, not only now but in the future. When forwarding messages, make sure not to pass on previous private messages by mistake. Don't write anything that you wouldn't say face to face or wouldn't want printed in a letter. Electronic messages can be saved and forwarded and retrieved in disputes over grades and other matters.